Hi, I'm Jessica Rogers, and this is Tea with Traci. Actually, tea and water with Traci. Today I'm going to introduce you to Traci Park. Traci Park is a candidate for council member for District 11 in Los Angeles. And I thought it would be really interesting to hear from Traci and see what she has to say, not so much about the politics or her position as council member, but more who is Traci and what is she all about? And so we're going to do that over some tea and water. And thank you for joining. Hi, Traci.
Hi, Jessica. It's so good to see you.
Thank you for joining me in my living room.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me over.
So I have had the absolute delight getting to know you. And I think that a lot of other people have yet to get to know a little bit more about you. And so thank you for joining me. Thank you for going on the ride. And let's see what everybody else can learn from you and about you and who you are, because you're an incredible human being. Let me just start off with that. I'm already telling you who she is without you even hearing from her. You'll have to stop me, please. In any case, so tell me a little bit about yourself. Let's do the basics, like where were you born? Where did you grow up?
Yeah, sure. So I was born in Downey, California, here in Los Angeles County. My father worked for General Telephone Electric. He climbed telephone poles for a living and was a member of Communication Workers of America. And my mom stayed home with me until I went to kindergarten. And then she became the school secretary at the school that I went to. And, after a number of years, my mother and father divorced, and my mom and I moved out to the high desert, and she got remarried to my stepfather, and she was a school secretary and the president of the California Schools Employees Association local chapter for about 20 years. And my stepfather was the director of technology for the school district. And I graduated and went away to college in Baltimore.
In about 2 minutes, she's told almost her whole life story. So I'm going to stop you. I'm going to stop you right there, because I'm already wondering, what hospital was she born in?
Downey Community Hospital.
Okay, great. I happen to know a little bit about that whole area, Downey, Santa Fe Springs. I was actually just there today. And the Whittier, that whole area. I many years ago worked in that area, so I have an idea of where you were born and what your early childhood was like a little bit. And I was saying that for me, being in those communities was great, that I always felt safe, and I really enjoyed the environment and the families there and the neighborhoods, that it was a very different energy from the west side that we get to enjoy today. And it was fun for me to go back there today and see how much it's changed in the last 2 decades.
Yeah. When I grew up there, it was a very modest, working class, family-oriented neighborhood. I had an aunt who lived just down the street and some other relatives who lived just down the street. And my best girlfriend to this day lived just about 6 houses down. We met when we were 2 years old. And we spent our childhoods riding bikes and going back and forth to each other's houses. And it really just was a community and a sense of family there. And it's something that I find, I have a lot of nostalgia for in a lot of ways.
So tell me, what was young Traci like back then? Like little Traci, what were you like?
Yeah, little Traci loved to read.
Okay.
Yeah, I learned to read when I was about 3.5.
Wow.
I was very, very proud of that. Green Eggs and Ham was the very first book that I read on my own. Although it's possible that it had been read aloud to me so many times that I actually just had it memorized. But my mom, like I mentioned, stayed home with me. And so we did activities every day together, whether it was going for bike rides along the LA River or going to Wilderness Park or to the zoo or the Bob Baker Marionette Theater in Los Angeles. we were always out doing something every single day. And she invested a lot of her time and energy into my early childhood years, getting me prepared for preschool and then onto kindergarten. And so, as a young girl, I really liked being outside. I played a lot of sports with my dad. I was playing ragball, t-ball when I was about 5 years old. I was barely tall enough to hit the ball off the stand. And, we played volleyball and basketball and softball growing up. And so, I spent a lot of time in sports with my dad, and a lot of time with my mom was doing chores and homework and reading. And, she was a little bit more of, the enforcer of rules, bedtime and vegetables at dinner and things like that. Dad was a little bit more of the fun streak in my life because he got away with getting to take me to sports and letting me stay up late.
I think a lot of people might be able to relate to that in terms of the difference between moms
being
and
a
dads
mom and a dad.
Who plays what role.
Yeah.
But how fabulous that you got that at least in your very early years, and then you became a fairly typical family where you became a family that had new family members in it. Yep. So tell me, so you had this childhood down south, and then you moved further up north. You said somewhere in the desert?
Yeah, out to the high desert. So, as a single mom with a young daughter, it was really expensive to live here in Los Angeles County, and we had to move someplace that was more affordable. And, my mom was a single mom for a lot of years and worked very hard for both of us to make sure that I had everything that I needed. And, I grew up in a very modest working class home. There wasn't a lot of extra, and I learned some very important lessons as a child about having to really work for things and being responsible for money. And we had a jar on the kitchen counter, and that's where we put extra dollar bills and change. And that was sort of the Friday night pizza fund and movie fund.
And that was when your mother was a single mom. Mm-hmm. What was it like for you when you went from having a mom and dad at home, and that's what your everyday life was, and then you were with your mom alone for a while? What was that like?
It rough, as I think a divorce is in any family, especially on young children. That said, my parents parted company on very good terms. They remained very close friends for the whole rest of my father's life. And even after my mom got remarried, my father and my stepfather became very good friends. And I just had 3 parents. We did everything together. We spent holidays together. And, I shuttled back and forth between them a little bit. But I think really they worked hard to make the circumstances as comfortable and as favorable as they could be. And frankly, at the end of the day, I had 3 wonderful parents. And really, what more could a kid ask for?
I agree. That sounds...
I was really lucky.
Personally, my kids love that they have 2 households. So you got a lot in that sense. And I always like to think of it as, and I grew up in that same situation myself, and as long as there's love, children are usually fairly happy. So now tell me, what was it like for you you said, it was tight for a while when your mom was on her own, having to make ends meet. And I love the idea of the cookie jar, because that's like an exciting thing of like, how much can we get in there? Let's get that pizza going. What was it like? Because you said it taught you some really important morals about life. Is that how you put it?
Yeah, and responsibility with money. When we moved into our home, my mom couldn't afford to decorate it all, and we furnished the house one piece of furniture at a time. And there was a long stretch where the television was sitting on a cardboard box in the living room. And, everything had to be budgeted and accounted for, and choices had to be made about where we were going to spend money and what priorities were going to be. And as I got older and I went away to college and then went to law school, I had to work my way through, and I had to be very responsible with my money. And it's something that I had learned early on, was to, make decisions and prioritize which things were important. And I think at the end of the day, while it was frustrating sometimes as a young person, it taught me a lot of really important lessons. And, in a lot of ways also, it made me very determined that I was going to have a career where I could be self-reliant and independent. And I really had to learn the value of working. And, it taught me a relationship with money that I carry with me today. And I think really influences a lot of the way that I think about things. And
So you said your dad was more of the fun one.
yeah.
We might not have noticed yet your incredible sense of humor, but Traci has me in stitches all the time. So I can't make you, jump monkey like that. I'm not going to ask you to do that. But tell me more about your dad and his sense of humor, and because you really are so lighthearted, and you light up the room with your joy and your ability to just make something fun, make fun out of anything in a really lighthearted, loving way.
Yeah.
So tell me more about your dad.
So he was always a prankster. And so I had a lot of cousins. They're all boys. And so when we would, and I was the youngest of them too. So when we would get together as a family, I always had this very close relationship with my dad, where, the boys would pick on me a little bit. They certainly didn't want me tagging along or coming to play with them or hang out. And so my dad was always there to, kind of entertain me. And if, we were going somewhere, Dad would always let me sit in the front seat next to him and put all the boys in the back. And he usually always had a stash of candy somewhere that only I got to know about. And he would tell me, you can have that, but don't you tell any of those kids in the back that it's up here. And so I always felt like I was in a bit of a conspiracy with my dad. And he just was fun-loving and larger than life. And he had this incredible laugh. And he would always find the best of and the most fun in whatever circumstances or situation he was in. And I definitely think I got my sense of fun in a lot of ways from my dad. And, we have to do a lot of things in life that are challenging and sometimes are a chore. But I have found that you get out of the circumstances what you put into them, what you make of them. And that's definitely something that, I learned from my dad. He passed away in 2005, and I still hear his voice in my head. I can hear his voicemail. It's that he would leave me. I miss him a lot. I really do.
That's really wonderful that you can still hear him.
Yeah.
And now you're going to make me cry.
Well, it's funny now that I've taken on this incredible challenge of, running for the CD11 seat. My dad hated politics, and he especially hated politicians. And so I often think, he in many ways might be rolling over in his grave if he knew what I was doing. And yet I also can't help knowing how incredibly proud he would be.
Oh, I don't know your dad's voice, and I can hear him telling you that he could not be any prouder of you.
Thanks.
And your courage and how you just show up in every aspect of your life.
Thank you.
Wow. So it's already evident, I think, what you've gotten from your parents. But what I don't want to put words in your mouth. What would you say? I mean, obviously you talked about your mother taught you all these skills for living, and your dad sort of brought the other aspect of the joy and the fun of life. But in your own words, what is it that you think you carry from the upbringing that you got? What's most important to you?
Yeah, a real sense of independence and a real sense of responsibility. It was always very clear to me that there were expectations of what I would do, whether that was homework or going to school or the fact that I was going to go to college. That was just a foregone conclusion. and that I was going to have to work for it. That, this was something that, particularly in pursuing an education, wasn't just going to be handed to me. My parents didn't have enough money to pay for me to go to college. And so I had to borrow money to do it. I also worked 2 jobs while I was in college, and I also worked while I was in law school. And, I always had their support, but they had taught me very early on to be responsible and to be accountable. And that if I was going to do something, no matter what it was, my best effort was expected. And those are lessons that have served me well in my career and in my life.
So when you decided to go to college, first tell me where you ended up going to.
I went to Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Maryland.
That is a very interesting choice for a girl who lived in the high desert.
Yeah.
From your parents, from your upbringing.
Yeah.
So now how did that happen?
Yeah. So I was dead set on going to school on the East Coast. I just really wanted to fly. I wanted to go as far away as I could. And I had gone to visit a friend who was in school at St. John's College in Annapolis. And that friend had suggested to me that I go look at Johns Hopkins, and had made some comments about what a great school it was. So I went up to Baltimore and I saw the campus, and I absolutely fell in love with it. And once I had been there...
Had you seen any other campuses?
At that point, no.
Okay.
Nope. Well, that's not true. I had actually spent quite a lot of time on the UCLA campus.
Okay.
I had friends that had gone to college there who were ahead of me in high school. So I had seen UCLA, which I loved, but I just knew I wanted to go to the East Coast. So once I saw the campus, I just couldn't envision anything else. And in fact, I was so motivated to go there that I graduated my junior year of high school. And Johns Hopkins had a program for high school juniors that wanted to matriculate to college early. So when I was 17 years old, I got into my Toyota Tercel hatchback and drove 3,000 miles from California to Baltimore. And I spent 4 wonderful years in Baltimore. I absolutely loved it there. Now that said, I thought I was going to freeze to death. My first winter in Baltimore, I had never felt cold like that. And I didn't own a wardrobe that was suitable for an East Coast winter. And I'll never forget this. I came home over the winter holiday that first year in college. And I told my mom, we have got to go shopping because I am literally freezing to death there. So we went to Nordstrom's and I tried on a few different coats. And the sales clerk asked me, what occasion is this for? And I said, well, winter in Baltimore. And she said, no. This is an
not
evening
gonna
coat.
work.
This is something you might wear out to the opera. This is not a coat to keep you warm. You really need to find an LL Bean catalog or something like that to buy a coat. So not only did I not own clothes, I had no skill set for shopping for clothes that were appropriate either. But I really loved Baltimore. And, when I was in college, I also worked in Washington, D.C. And one of the things that I was so impressed with the very first time I went to campus was when you get on I-95, you have the option of going south to Washington, D.C. or going north to New York. And I remember seeing that as, a young person. I was only 16 the first time I went to Baltimore. And I thought, wow, I'm really somewhere. This is the epicenter of the world right here. And it's where I want to be. So, big change.
But yet you came home. And we're happy for that.
I did.
Was it the cold weather? Did you have enough of the cold weather after 4 years, or?
I missed my family. I missed my family, and I wanted to be in a place where I could spend more time with them. I was only able to come home once or twice a year, and I was ready to come back to Southern California. So I moved back to LA. I got my first apartment in Delray and was there for a little while. And then I moved over to Brentwood. And this is while I was in law school at Loyola. And then eventually I moved over to Hollywood for a while and then came back over to
So
Venice.
when did you know you would be going to law school at some point in your life?
Oh, when I was about 5.
Wow.
Yes.
So at 3.5, you knew how to read.
Yep.
You went from green eggs and ham to
law school.
I'm going to go to law school.
Yes.
Wow. That's impressive.
Yes. Well, I watched a lot of lawyer shows on television as a kid. Night Court was my favorite. So my mom went back to school. And my dad would stay home and babysit me. I was supposed to go to bed at 8 o'clock, but Dad didn't enforce bedtime. So I would stay up and watch some of those shows with him. And I was just obsessed with lawyer shows when I was a kid. And so I had decided very, very early that that is what I wanted to do. And, you know, I would go so far as to act out these elaborate courtroom dramas when I was a kid. I would take a Cabbage Patch doll and put one over the mantle on the fireplace, and I would put another in the recliner. The one on the mantle was the judge, and the one in the recliner was the witness, and I would give opening statements, and I would cross-examine the doll, and then I would give my closing argument to the judge, and usually it involved disputes over things like bedtime and vegetables and chores, and...
Now I wanted to, did you ever put any of your friends in school through this?
Yes. And my friends in life also, yes.
And how did that go? Did that go down well? Did you find, were you able to like get them motivated and in agreement? Were you good? Is this how, did it teach you the skills to make all parties feel good about it?
That was a different skill set that maybe came later. But you know, you can't have been friends with Traci Park for long without having been through some form of an interrogation.
Oh my gosh, that's great.
Yeah, I like to ask a lot of questions and really dive deep on things.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think my first word was doing, which was not only a statement, but also a question. And that's something that, you know, I sort of feel like is significant. It's sort of been my motto of my life ever since, doing.
So now tell me, since you like to do, I know you also, sure, you're extremely successful in your line of work, and you obviously live a very responsible, great life, but part of that I know involves your love for nature.
Yeah.
Well, tell me more about it, because I've seen a few pictures, but I just want to hear it from you. Like, where have you been? What do you like? Where's like your most inspirational place to go?
Yeah. So, wow, there are so many amazing places. And, you know, I've had the opportunity to do a lot of traveling in my life, and I have seen some of the most spectacular places in nature I think that there are on the planet. I'll tell you one of the most impactful trips I've been on. A number of years back, we flew to Chengdu, China, and then from there into Tibet. And I traveled across the Tibetan plateau, and we went to Mount Everest Base Camp on the China side. And to see the Himalayas and that mountain range is absolutely spectacular. And the rivers and the glaciers and the entire area is absolutely spectacular. You know, I also spent a lot of time up in Mammoth, and that has been a place that has been very near and dear to my heart as well. I also love the nature here locally on the west side of Los Angeles.
I was going to say, like, what's your favorite spot on the west side?
Oh my gosh.
I mean, there's so many, like we have the ocean, the mountains, like we have it all. So I was wondering, is there a particular place where you go that it helps you feel connected or it refreshes you?
Yeah, I really love the Los Leones Trail up here in the Palisades. That is a fantastic workout, and it's a great great time to spend, you know, sort of thinking and getting centered and getting some clarity. And when I get up to the top and I can just sit on the bench for a few minutes and look at our beautiful, beautiful district that we live in, that's one of my absolute favorite things to do here on the west side.
It's a great spot. I love that. I love that.
That said, I have another favorite thing. That's almost a tie. It's a close second. I love riding my bike on the Marvin Brody bike path. That ride from Venice through Marina del Rey down to Playa del Rey south is absolutely one of my favorite things to do. Every time I have guests come visit from out of town, that's something that we do every time.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
We're definitely really lucky to have these amazing spots on the west side.
Yeah. And I feel that means that we need to be better stewards of them too. And, we have these beautiful Santa Monica Mountains, our beautiful coastline, and we really need to work on protecting those and preserving those resources for future generations.
Okay, so you got to college. Now we're in you're a lawyer. You're working. What on earth would make you want to get into politics after you said that your father would, really be questioning your choices? How does that happen for somebody who already had it all and had this fabulous great life where you had time to travel and you can enjoy, the fruits of your hard labor? What inspired you to do this?
Yeah, well, I never imagined in a million years that I would run for office. This wasn't something that I planned to do. This wasn't in my 5-year plan because I really like plans, budgets, and timelines. That's the thing for me. But, I live in Venice, and I have seen firsthand this horrific tragedy unfolding, not just in Venice, but all over our district. And I was aware of the growing frustration around the district with the lack of adequate responsiveness from the city. So when some folks in Venice, business owners and residents, asked me if I would consider doing this, at first I was a little shocked at even the thought of trying it. But after giving it some thought and evaluating my experience as an attorney and recognizing that the community needed help and that the community was asking me to do this, I felt as though I really didn't have any other choice but to take this on. I knew that with my background and experience working with cities and other government entities, that I brought a certain level of experience and knowledge to the table and a genuine willingness to partner with communities to design platform and policies that were responsive to the needs of our community. I knew I could do it. People said I was crazy. People said I was crazy. And when I took this on as a first-time candidate that had never run for office before, I didn't bring into this with me a donor base or political network. I was just Traci Park from Venice. And, I didn't know much about running I didn't know anything about running a campaign, but I knew enough to know that I was going to need help. So, we sort of started the process of, making some cold calls to political consultants. And
can I just stop you because I don't want to lose this for a second? Because what you just described really moved me. First, you mentioned that you live in Venice, and I took a deep breath because I don't live in Venice. But when I showed up in Venice over a year ago and saw what was happening there, I couldn't eat for a few days. Yeah. So that alone is always gut wrenching for me. For all my friends in Venice that I've gotten to be close friends to a lot of people in Venice now, trying to assist in the horrific human tragedy that we have going on there. But the way you described this is, like you said, this was a calling. You didn't have a choice. You felt like you knew what your skill set was, and you knew what your background and experience was, and that when you did the Traci thing, which was like, I gotta check everything out here. What's my plan? Here's my 5-year plan. I wasn't planning for this one. How do I fit it in there? Can I fit it in there? Is this workable? But most of all, what's the most important thing to do here? And you it sounds like you really took a deep dive. Instead of just saying, I'm going to go do this thing and I want to change in my life, you said, there's an incredible need for my skill sets right now, and my community needs me. And so how will I make this work in my life? Now that, Traci, that's rare. Most people don't think that way. Most people are thinking differently, and I don't know how many have told you this, but I want to make sure you hear this. How incredibly thoughtful and compassionate and generous it is of you to take this. You know, I married a lawyer. I know what it's like. It's a really hard job, but it's a very secure job for the most part. And you had a life. You had a life. You traveled. You have your friends. You had everything was structured. You had your perfect 5-year plan. I'm sure you had a few 5 more year plans behind that plan, and everything was in line. And you tossed all of that in the air.
I ripped up the 5-year plan.
Yeah.
And started over.
Because you chose the necessity of what you saw happening to your community and the humanitarian crisis at hand, and said, I can't not do something. And now not everybody has your skill set, so not everybody's going to be able to come in and say, I'm going to run for the council member position because that's where I know I can make the biggest impact. But a lot of people have made some changes, and those who have the courage to stand up. And I want you to hear that honestly, it is the most giving and caring thing that you can do to show up for your community. And of course, you're speaking to a social worker, so of course I'm going to say those things to you. So here you are. Now you've taken the leap. You've taken the jump, and you said, like, I didn't know about campaigning. I'm new
How
to
do you
all
do
of
it?
this. But we also know that you're doing this better than anybody else. And honestly, when I look at other positions that are out in this Los Angeles, the city of Los Angeles right now, you are showing up in a way that most other candidates could never dream of. Now, this probably has something to do with the fact that you were reading at 3.5 and that at 5 you were already training for this position. Okay? I'm just saying, I don't know. And it might have something to do with the fact that from a very young age, like you said, your mom spent so much time with you, giving you all these very precious tools for living, as well as your father. So that by the time you got to the dog-eat-dog school and you had to show everybody because you showed up at 17 and you probably aced your way through that and you held a job so that you could afford to pay for it. I mean, all of everything that you have done has led you to this moment. And so I know you're still a candidate, and June is a few months away. Tell me, like, so now that you're here, do you see how everything that you have done has actually led you here, even though it felt like it was an emergency that you jumped into?
Yeah, definitely. I felt as though things happened for a reason and the universe aligned a certain way. I was very fortunate that the firm where I'm a partner was willing to let me take on this incredible opportunity. And, I think you know this, but when I started the process, it was a learning process and a listening process. And I came to every neighborhood in CD11 to meet people, just to hear what was on their mind, to understand what the challenges were that they faced. And there was a lot of consistency around the different parts of the district because of some commonalities of experience that have happened over the last few years, but also in many ways, my own personal life experience. Growing up in a household where, every dime had to be accounted for, understanding what economic insecurity looks and feels like. As we have been through this really crazy experience of the pandemic over the last couple of years, I understand when I hear from people what a challenge that was and what it felt like when they lost jobs and what it felt like when they had to close businesses. I get that and I hear that loud and clear from people. And so not only was it my process of listening and learning as I started just the initial exploratory process early last year, but drawing from a lot of my own personal experiences. And I really do think that all of that culminated in this moment where I recognized I can do this. I can. And like I said, we started calling around and, hey, I'm a first time candidate. I'm going to run against an incumbent. And, some people said, thanks, but no thanks. Good luck to you. Some people didn't even bother to call back at all. And yet I would not be deterred. This was something that I had to do. And people were counting on me to do it right and to do it well. And that meant that I had to roll my sleeves up and learn and be present in this community. And that is something that I will continue to do after I'm elected.
What's incredible about you is you came out really early. Was it June of last year?
July 1st is when we formally launched.
So July 1st you formally launched, but a lot of people had heard for quite some time that you were planning on running. And this is a community that's tight-knit because at this point, for months, you have people in every different neighborhood of our district up in arms because of our crisis and our lack of leadership. And so everybody's talking to each other, something very new for our district, which is something really beautiful and wonderful. And I hope we can keep that going forward for many, many decades to come. You start, but you're the only one. It's like you're out there starting a campaign on your own.
Yeah.
And then September rolls around and you're like still on your own. And October rolls around and you're still on your own. At which point, I truly believe most residents in our district thought, I guess it's going to be just Traci in this fight. And, Allison came in at the very end of the year. But even then, after Allison came in January, we didn't really think there was going to be any other candidates to pop in. So it was a really busy beginning of the year when everything shifted rapidly with the way the recall went down and then a whole bunch of new candidates coming in.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm assuming it's been somewhat of a whirlwind for you.
It has. And yeah, I was a little bit lonely out there as the only candidate for all of those months. But I'll tell you what it did do for me was create an opportunity where I was able to partner with so many different communities in CD11. So, of course, there was the whole issue with the bond in motion to take over our beaches and parks. And I met a lot of folks up here in the Palisades when we were out there last summer in the fight to save Will Rogers. I spent a big chunk of my summer last year down at Dockweiler interviewing, families that were visiting the beach to collect data about, where are you coming from, to demonstrate that this was a beach that had heavy recreational use and was a real resource from families from underserved communities across LA County and beyond. Obviously, there had been significant issues at Mar Vista Park and Westchester Park with the encampments, and I was able to partner with community members in both of those places to draw attention and resources to have those issues dealt with. I have been very focused on the Bionah wetlands and the RV encampment along Jefferson. I've spent, almost a year now talking about this. And so I have had a lot of time in the field to really know and understand these issues, to meet the people who are dedicated to fixing them and building out those alliances that I think ultimately distinguish me from the rest of the crowd and are what they're going to carry me over the finish line in June.
So you've obviously made a lot of relationships and you've got tremendous support. It's, you are absolutely 100% undeniably the front runner in this race. And that's just a fact. So you're already, in a way, as best you can with the power that you have right now, attempting to do the full job that you've been given, that you will be given when the time comes. What is that like?
It's a whirlwind, honestly. Because in addition to running the campaign and all the constituent engagement that goes with it, behind the scenes, I'm working on substantive policy issues. I am not only paying attention to what all is going through all of our neighborhood councils and the motions that go to RAC, I'm working on motions of my own so that when I'm elected on day one, I have things that I'm going to be bringing to the city council. And so there's just a constant amount of work and things that I'm engaged in. And, you said it, I'm all over the district. I'm everywhere, and I'm meeting with everybody. And I'm working behind the scenes. So when I'm not out in the field, I am literally at home writing policy and writing motions and working on the substantive issues that we're going to have to address when I'm elected. So I'm already doing the job.
so what I noticed is you do have a lot of support, and I would assume that in that position you need a lot of support. What is the response from your point of view? Obviously, I'm seeing it from a different angle, but from your point of view, in terms of the residents, how are they responding to you? Are they, not everybody's gonna, first of all, now we have a plethora of candidates. So people are gonna have friends that they're gonna wanna vote for, or people that they've worked with that they're gonna wanna support, or somebody has an idea that resonates more with them than your policies. Until they watch this interview, of course, and they realize you're just completely irresistible. But what is it how is that working for you in terms of your relationship with the residents? Because I know, obviously, since there was a recall, that the constituents of CD11 don't feel heard, don't feel like there's any connection, that it's just there's like a huge separation between residents and the council member. And even though we have in every single neighborhood there's a community council or neighborhood council, even the neighborhood councils themselves did feel like they had a relationship with our council member. So how is that working for you now? Well, even just as a candidate.
Yeah, well, there are more candidates now, but it really hasn't changed anything in terms of my core supporters across the district. The campaign has continued to grow at just a remarkable rate, even over these last couple of months as new candidates have jumped into the race. I think that you're really onto something when you point out that so many people felt unheard and as though they didn't have an advocate or an ally or a voice at City Hall. I certainly have heard the frustration from our neighborhood and community councils. Those are volunteers who put in hundreds of hours of their own time. They are truly the experts in their own neighborhoods and communities. And to put that kind of time and effort in, to feel as though your council member's not paying attention, doesn't care, that's really frustrating. And, I have had the time and the opportunities to be present in those meetings, to really hear and listen to what the issues were. I have, like I said, worked so closely with so many groups over the last 9-10 months on the big things. I've spent a lot of time out in the encampments talking to folks, trying to understand what has worked and what hasn't worked. And I just think that it is going to be really hard for, some of these newcomers to really understand the issues, to get up to speed, and, to build those relationships across the district that not only are going to help their campaigns, but be partners to them once they're elected. And I'm really proud of the work that we've done to get those relationships in place.
I'm glad that you actually did choose to start early and that you did have that opportunity, because what I think what you're saying is when you give yourself the time in a campaign to start early and go in, it really gives you an opportunity to get to know people, where you're not just meeting them for 5 seconds and then you got to move on to the next because you've got a month before an election, or even just several months before an election. So that definitely, I think it gave you a leg up in terms of time, because even now you're extremely busy. Your schedule is always full, but in terms of your relationship with people, I wonder, have you thought about how it will be, how you want it to be, knowing that you have a very united district right now? do you have any special ideas about that? What like idea, like if you could just like have all your wishes come true in terms of our neighborhood, our neighborhoods, what would that look like?
Well, people that are living in street encampments would be in a safe place where they're being taken care of and getting the care that they need and the help that they need. Our neighborhoods would be safe so that kids can go outside and play. Our parks and our beaches would be, full of tourists and visitors and locals alike. Our business community would be thriving. Our restaurants would be, full of guests, and our tourism economy, which is about 30% of our economy over here on the west side, would be thriving. If I could wave a magic wand and accomplish all of those things at once.
Can I add a few more?
I will. Oh, sure. Oh, there's more. There's plenty.
I'm thinking of our youth
Yeah.
who need jobs.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of single moms who need support, like your mother needed support. Those are the other two items that I know you probably were thinking, but there's so much. And you were thinking like, wow, Jess, if we had just accomplished those ideals, that would have been great. But if we can have it all, let's have everybody taken care of.
Yes, and I think you make a really good point there. We spend so much time on the issue right in front of us, which is, the homeless situation. But, you're right. There are families that are struggling. There are single moms that are struggling. There are young people that have to make really hard decisions about, can I afford to get an education or not? And those are all, pieces of the platform and our policy and things that I'm going to have to address and encounter. And one of the things that I would like to be able to look back on someday and say is I helped and I made a difference for these folks. And I recognize how diverse and how many different constituencies there are in this district. And my job is to know and advocate for every single one of them. And that is a very tall order.
Well, but what we talked about earlier is how incredibly suited you are for the position because of your background, because of your upbringing, because you really got a taste for all the different aspects of you've really been through it all in that sense. Your background is very well suited to be able to represent residents and residents of our neighborhood. Now, of course, when you become councilwoman, you will automatically have a seat at the table of the city of Los Angeles, which is a very big seat at the table for our city. And you're going to be, when you mentioned policies, I'm thinking the policies that you're busy writing are policies that won't just impact our district, but will impact the entire city as a whole. Now that to me sounds like completely overwhelming, but for you with a 5-year-old who was, rearranging the world, I assume it's just part of your dream of being able to help people. And I know in your work you worked with municipalities, so it's probably for you just like, that's just what you do and what you know, and so you understand what's best going to help us in all the areas where we need a lot of help. But tell me more about it. Like for you, like what does that feel like knowing that you're going to be at City Hall, sitting with all your colleagues, discussing these really important issues and presenting them with new policies that you want to see go through?
It's the challenge of a lifetime, honestly, and it's something that I think will be very rewarding. I really welcome the opportunity to work with the other council members. I've had a lot of those conversations behind the scenes with other sitting council members, as well as with other candidates that are running for different seats around the district. And I have, historically as an attorney, been very collaborative, not only with my own team members, but with my clients and their teams, and even with my opposing counsels to really dive in and solve big, complex problems. So I there are moments when it's all very overwhelming. There are so many things that need to be fixed, but it's really about how you decide that you're going to frame that issue in your mind, right? This is a problem, needs to be solved, but this is an opportunity to make the community better. And I know that it can be done. I know that it's going to be difficult. And I also know that we're not always going to agree on everything. But I have found that when you are honest and you are transparent and you are willing to talk to your constituents about this is where we are, this is what needs to be done, here's all the different points of view on what the right way to do this thing is, just having those collaborative conversations and really recognizing and hearing from differing views and different opinions on things really builds a lot of goodwill. And so I know that even in the challenging things that lie ahead, there will be good to come from it. And like I said, I know that we can do this, and I know that we can make things better, and we are going to help a lot of people along the way.
I'm sorry, I'm sort of speechless because I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, are you real? And she couldn't be more real. Seriously, it is so refreshing to witness your excitement, your dedication, and your true heart, where your heart comes from when you're talking about wanting to help the city. And we, in my opinion, we're not experiencing that right now. I know there's a few great council members out there right now, but I wouldn't say that of the entire team. And I believe that when we walk outside our doors, and especially you in Venice, you have an experience of what lack of leadership looks like. And so the citizens, the residents, people in Los Angeles and around the world who are seeing what's going on in Los Angeles are really, really disappointed in our leadership. And so for you not to be somebody you're not a career politician, this wasn't your thing. You had your 5-year plan and it wasn't in there. But yet you stepped aside and said, I have the skill set and I care. And I care so much that I'm going to bring this and then you mentioned these really important keys. It's like, as long as we're respectful towards each other and we come with integrity and we're willing to present all the options, and then we take that back to Angelenos and we tell them, hey, this is what's going on. This is what the picture is all about. And there's you also mentioned another incredibly important word. You said transparency. We don't have transparency at all right now. But that is what Angelenos are craving. They're craving transparency. Why is our sheriff so popular? He's popular because this man is not only is he fully transparent with his words, he's fully transparent. They all have cameras on themselves right now where, honestly, maybe we should, and I'm not suggesting you create that policy, but what would it be like if our council members had open door policies where all of their meetings, people were let know. And actually, this is a shout out to a friend of mine who did say something similar. He said, what would it be like if our politicians had more of an open door policy where they were constantly having town halls, where they were always open and where they would share their calendars saying, on this day I met with this person, so that the residents would know who they're talking to, who they're meeting with, and what their conversations are about. Yeah. Maybe those don't need to be recorded, but at least so that we have a better idea. What are you doing for us, who are paying our tax dollars for you to take care of our city? Because law enforcement has to do that. So it's just the idea of, we need more transparency and we need more connection with our residents. And I love that you're bringing all of that up. Well, Traci, it's such a delight to get to know you better. I know anybody who's watching is just so thrilled to get to know you a little bit better. You are an incredible human being. And what's interesting is in the debates we get to see how incredibly intelligent and efficient and wise and sharp you are, and how you have very detailed policies, and how you're able, like we see all your skill set in terms of your career and all the things that you're capable of. So there's no doubt that you're already better than any council member we've had here in decades. But what we don't see is this, Traci.
Yeah.
We don't get to see who you really are, that you're just like everybody else, a loving human who truly cares and who has all kinds of great interests.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Traci, and thank you for joining us.